All right, everybody, welcome back. Hope everybody's doing okay so far with the assignments. Had a lot of good questions about what things are required, and you may have noticed that the rubric for assignment number 3, which is having to do with your different protocol schematics, if you are choosing to animate the slide, you will notice that there is no rubric posted for that one. That was kind of a during the lecture decision that I decided to make. I don't have a rubric posted for that. But with both assignments, you're going to have the opportunity to resubmit, and that brings me to the initial homework. You'll see that the grades were posted for that one, and if you would like to recoup some of the points that you may have missed on that, you can feel free to use the comments that are on the rubric that I posted back on Canvas with assignment number 1 and resubmit again and try to get some of those points back. But overall, the grades were fantastic. I think that people are doing really, really good with those. I was really excited with a lot of the assignments that were handed in overall. So great job on assignment number 1. I'm looking forward to looking at number 2 and 3 in the coming weeks and hoping to get those grades out pretty soon. This week, we're shifting gears a little bit. We're moving away from our traditional kind of lecture that has going to have some notes with it, and this is going to be just a 100% me walking through chapters 1 through 3 on the Excel for Scientists book, and we're going to go through some of this, and then I'll talk a little bit about at the end about what the assignment for week 4 will be. There will be no discussion this week. There's really no discussion to have about Excel formulas. We all understand they're part of a necessary evil of being a scientist. I apologize if some of this information is a little bit dry, a little bit boring overall, but I guarantee that working with Excel is something that's going to be integral to your career moving forward. It's been something that's allowed me to separate out in certain areas, and just understanding some of the capabilities allow you to do things faster as you move forward. But the only way to learn those is by practicing them. So I would encourage you to follow along with this lecture by having your own spreadsheet up and open. I'm going to be posting the downloads that are available for the spreadsheets that I'm working from. They all come with the Excel book that you can get from the library for free. So I'd encourage you to download those. I will also post them with the lecture, so you should be able to get them there. I would encourage you to work along with me as I'm going. Pause the video, try to get moving forward with the things as they go. And I would also encourage you to do the exercises at the end of the chapter that are associated with it, or the end of the part 1, which is chapters 1 through 5. We're just going to be going through chapters 1 through 3 right here. We may have time in the coming days to get chapters 4 and 5 posted as well, but we'll talk about the assignments that's associated with these afterwards. All right, so here we go. Moving on with Excel 2013 for Scientists. I'm going to move this off to the side and bring up our first spreadsheet so we can get going. We're going to start with just some real basics of Microsoft Excel, and that's just general navigating. So if we want to kind of get to different sites on this spreadsheet, it's important for us to kind of know how to get around here. So if we want to just kind of get to our starting point, which would be right in the middle, if we press our Control and Home, you can see at any time that's going to take you back to this Control Home. And actually what I'm going to do here is I have this set up right here. You might notice the stand. I'm going to change my camera around so that you're going to actually view my keyboard instead of me yammering on here. So this might be a little bit more beneficial. Let me get everything set up, make sure everything's organized. There we go. There's the keyboard. And now I can adjust this appropriately. Okay, so once again, we have our cursor over here. We're going to press Control and Home, and that's going to bring us right to that home screen right there. If we use our Control and Arrow key, that's going to give us to kind of our section borders. So Control and Arrow, that's going to bring us down to our next cell that has something entered in it. If we go Control and to the right, that's going to bring us right there. We can continue to use that, and you can see it jumps to the next cell with a value entered into it. Then if we use our Control Shift plus arrow, that will help us to select wherever we're from to the next area that has information in it. Okay? And then we use Control and arrow keys. We can expand it. So let's say we have this selection right here and we want to go a little bit further. We can go just Shift and one more. That's going to add one more. If we use Shift and up, that's going to use one less overall. So if we use this figure here, we can kind of use all of those keys. So we're going to start in A1, and we're just going to press Control and down just to bring us to A24. Control and down. There we go. That's going to bring us right to that one. If we press it again, it takes us to the very end of the spreadsheet. 1 million rows of data. Hopefully you don't have any protocols that have that many rows. Okay, we'll go back up by pressing Control and up, and that brings us right back to where we are. If we go to B1, you can see by pressing Control and down there, it just brings us to the end. So it's basically, it takes you to where things change in the spreadsheet. So we go from that 10 to 38 and so on. Now if we start in B1 once again, and we press our Control Shift and down arrows, Control Shift and down, that's going to highlight all of those right there. And if we want to expand this by one, we don't want that. If we want to expand that selection by one, once again, we press just the Shift button and down, or Shift button and up. So we want just that Shift button and 10. And now if we go over to J1 right here, we can start to name that box. Okay, so we're going to do, so we're right here, Control, here we go. And what we're going to do here is by typing J24 into here, J24, there we go. That's going to bring us down there. And by pressing Shift and Enter, we can highlight all of those together. Okay. Now what we want to do is type equals row, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then if we press Control and Enter, that will allow us to enter that equation into all of the selected cells. And what this is doing is it's using this equation equals row, and that's going right over here to our row. You can see 1, 1, 2, 2. So if you ever want to repeat what row, maybe you're using a spreadsheet that's really wide and you want to be able to get that information somewhere else so you can see what row you're in at any time, that's a nice equation that you can use to do that. Let's move on. So if we go over to our F11, we're going to start talking about some of our different equations that we can use here. We started to talk about standard deviation a little bit last class when we were doing some of the our effect sizes and such. Actually, that was class 2, but we're going to just work with that a little bit more. So if we have this right here, we want to start by clicking on this guy right here, and we're going to choose the function, which is another way to do that. Instead of just having to know it, you can actually use this little key right here. So we're going to do that, and we are going to choose standard deviation of .s. That's a new version. The one I used before was just stdev. You can use .s as well because that gives you the sample size. So we're going to select that. The benefit of using that function tab is that it gives you a little bit of this input screen. Before, you have to know how to make the arguments. Now, given this, it allows you to enter these in a little bit more logically. You don't necessarily have to have the same understanding of what the arguments are. So for these, we're basically going to use all of the numbers above it. So what we're going to use here is we're going to click on this guy right here. We're going to then click on Control, Shift, and the up arrow, and you can see that highlights that entire section. Okay. We're going to click on OK, and you can see now that we have the standard deviation of that entire section. Okay, now we're going to go over back to B23. We're going to now count if, amongst this selection, if the value is greater than 0.5. So once again, we'll go here, and we are going to select the count if our equation. Count if goes in. The range, once again, we want this guy, and now Control Shift up. That gives us right there. And now the second part of this, we're going to add in the other argument, and we're going to type in greater than 0.5. We only want to count the number of values here that are greater than 0.5. If we click OK, you can see that the number 3 comes up there. What that associates with is, look, okay, here's one that's greater than 0.5. Here's two that are greater than 0.5. Here's one that is 0.5. That is not counted. Here's number 3. So this right here gives us the value. It's counting if we are greater than 0.5. Okay. We're going to move on to our quick track. So in this portion, we've learned how to identify and move around very easily. Let's zoom out just a little bit more. There we go. We put our rows in here. We put our standard deviations in here. And then we used count if. Now we're going to move over here to a different spreadsheet that has a number of different strains of bacteria and values associated with a number of tests of each one of those strains. Let's see if I can zoom out enough so we can see that whole entire thing. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a quick way to calculate the sum. Let's say, for example, we wanted to get the sum of all of test 1 and the sum of all, let's zoom out one more, the sum of all of strain 1, okay? What we want to do there. So what we would do is we'll click in A1 to start, and we can do that, we know, by just clicking Control Home. There we go, back to A1. And now we want to select this whole thing. So we're going to press Control, Shift, and the down arrow. That's going to bring us over there. Control, Shift, and the over arrow. Now we've selected our entire data set. If we want to add in an extra row for our calculations, remember we press Shift and over, Shift and down, and that's going to give us one extra row, one extra column. Now what we want to do here is we want to use our Formulas tab right there, and we're going to go from here and we are going to add in our sum button. So if we go to next to the sum button, we can choose what we want. Do we want average? Do we want calculation? Right now you can see that we have the sum. We want the average, and now that's added that on afterwards. If you look at that, that's averaged that entire thing. So let's go back and let's try and do this again and do it the right way. So we got to clear out our sum that we mistakenly put in there. Let's try that again. Remember, start here, Control Shift down, Control Shift over. Now we want to add one right here next to auto sum. We want to add in the average. There we go. So now for this 4.48 is the average of all the ones above it. Over here, this average, that is the average of all the columns to the left. So a nice quick little trick for us to do that. If we wanted to then change this table to make it a little bit easier for us to manipulate, let's say we wanted to be able to organize this data. Well, If we really wanted to do that, we could kind of come up here and let's say we wanted to order these all based on whoever had the highest value for test number 1. We would go to data, then we would go to sort, and then we would say, okay, my data has head bars. We are going to sort by test 1, and now it's going to be smallest to largest. We want to do it largest to smallest. And now we've sorted that based on that. You can see that the average got brought in there as well. And that's only, once again, the above. But we have sorted and everything's been organized that way. If we go back, though, right to here, and let's delete our average column for now. Now let's say we want to make that a little easier. All we have to do, highlight once again, we can go to our insert table. Where's the data for your table? There it is, right there. Once again, my data has headers, and now we have formatted it as a table. If we want to do the same thing we did before, which is organize all of this entire data table by who had the highest value in test number 1, all you need to do is just click on the little drop-down arrow next to test 1, click it, sort from largest to smallest, and now we have organized the entire thing. And you can see that the ordering has now changed, but we go from 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, all the way down to 1 based on that. So this is a nice, helpful kind of little trick if you're using a big data table. The important thing to understand here is that if you're going to be exporting this data for statistical analysis, you do not want to have it in a table format. You want to have it back in your normal format, just like this, because it'll export better. Okay, let's move on. Using the old fill handle. Okay, so we're going to switch from chapter 1 to our chapter 2. Here we go. Nice. And what we're going to be talking about here is how to autofill overall. And a lot of you may have known that you can pull down on this guy right here, and there are some automatic sequences that are already entered. So we're going to show you how to use those correctly. So, for example, if we have day and we're talking about how many hours people are working or who's analyzing different things on different days, we want to say, okay, we're going to do this Monday through Friday. So if we click here and we drag this down, we don't want Saturday in there. We only want to Friday. Nobody's working on Saturday. But if we want to repeat that, if we hold this down or reselect, it's still going to give us Saturday and Sunday because it wants to complete that series. But if we delete that Saturday, delete that Sunday, and once again go back to our end and press the Shift key or the Control key, we can repeat that sequence once again without having those sections in there that we didn't want. So we've been able to go Monday through Friday, Monday through Friday. So we're essentially having 2 weeks here. Now, on all of these days, people are going to be working 8 hours. So if I want to do the fill handle, the way you know you have that, when you're in the cell, generally you're going to have that big plus sign. What we want to do is go to the corner where there's that kind of small green square, and when we see that little plus sign, that means we are activating the fill handle. If I double click on the fill handle right now, it's going to fill in all the cells that are next to whatever we have right here. So by doing that, you can see we just add 8 to all those days. However, what if I didn't want to do that? What if I wanted to say, okay, we're in the middle of a 2-week study. What day number of the study is this overall? Okay, if we go to just 1 and click on it, well, it's just going to do 1s again. We don't want that. We want this to go in order. So in order to get that to go a little bit further, all we need to do is double click once again, and then you'll see this little thing pop up down here that gives you options on your autofill. Well, we don't want just copy cells. We want to fill a series. So now if you change that to fill series, it will automatically shift to 1 through 10 and go in order. Okay? However, let's say if we want a series that's different than 1. For example, what if we want to go up by 10s? So this is just plus 10. You can see the column header here. So we have 0. Here's our 10. Okay? Now we have our 2. The way to get this to repeat, we have to select both cells. What we're effectively telling Excel right now is repeat the change that we've seen here, increasing by 10 over the rest of my range. So if we go to that corner, double click, it's going to repeat whatever that is for the rest of that column. Now we're going to do something that's increasing by a weird amount. We're going to go up by 3.3 every day. And I'm really bad at math, so I don't want to go 7, 10.3 if I don't have to. Sorry, my number key was 10.3. I could do it this way if I want, okay, and get to where I want. But let's say I am way worse at math. I'm going to double click once again. We have our 7s. I'm going to go down to my autofill series right here. Oh, sorry. No, I'm not going to go to my autofill. I'm going to keep that how it is though. But I'm going to go to my fill button. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm having to expand this. Aha. There we go. Right there. Let's move this over so you guys can see my keyboard as well. Here's our fill drop down. Sometimes you have to expand your window so you get all the options. And what we're going to do here is we're going to fill with a series. And this gives us more options. Okay, it tells you what is the step value overall. Because before we said we want that step value to be 3.3, we're going to go 3.3 right there. And as you can see, it adds in that step value without us having to do the math for the first one and bring it on. Okay, next thing we're going to do, D times E. So we want our D column times our E column. Right here, you can see that we already have that D times E, okay, in our column F. We're going to change that up. So let's just see how we do this. We're going to type the equals, and then we're going to move over right to our D column, and then we're going to type our multiply by sign, and then our E. The one thing we're going to do here is we're going to press Control and Enter together. What that does is it allows us to carry over any errors as we move forward. It's just important to use Control and Enter. If you pressed Enter, it would just move you down one. It would do ineffectually the same thing, but we want to make sure that we press Control with that to get our control. Okay, so we have our D times E column right there. 0 times 7 is 0. 10 times 10.3 is 103, and so on. The last one we're going to do is talk about, okay, well, what if we had 3 different researchers who were taking turns and rotating through on all these 3 days? Well, if we wanted to just repeat this, we could just go right like that, highlight the 3, and then double click to get them to repeat throughout. So we can see that GMB does day 1, Tommy does day 2, and Brad does day 3, and then we're back to Greg on day 1, GMV. But we can also do this if we have a big list that we want to save. Let's say that there's a list or an order that we use over and over again with many different types of spreadsheets. Well, we can do that a little bit differently because we can kind of save that list. So let's highlight these 3 right here, and we're actually going to go to the File tab, and then we're going to go all the way down to our Options. Once we get to our Options, we're going to go to Advanced and scroll. When we scroll down, we're going to go to the General heading right here, and we are going to edit custom lists. What we're going to do, you can see that I've already added this in one time. We're going to do a new list here. And we're going to click import. And what that's going to do is it's going to import that GMV, TJK, BDO as a list series. We'll click OK. We'll click OK again. And now, if I want that list anywhere, let's say I want it over here. For example, GMV. I'm going to type that in. Now, I'm going to use my autofill handle, and look what happens. TJK, BDO come up automatically because we have programmed this list in there. So if there's a series of orders that you use frequently that's different from Monday through Sunday, or just going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can program that in by using that function that we just did right there. Okay, moving on. Relative versus absolute cell references. This is chapter 3 right here. Let's close this one and we will open up our chapter 3 database. And I'll make sure that's the right size. Hang with me. There we go. Okay. And what we're going to do here is talk about absolute and kind of locked cell references. We did this a little bit last week as well, but I want to move on and give you a little bit more insight into how we do this because I went through it pretty quick overall. So what we're going to do here is first we're going to talk. Oh, do I have column A? There we go. First thing we're going to do is say, okay, what if we just want a non or a relative cell reference in general? What we're going to do here with our column C, this yellow section right here, is all we want to do is multiply A times B, okay? And if we wanted to fill that down, we would just double click, and there we go. We have this nice A times B is 2, A times B is 8, over and over and over again. We want this column to be representative of that. But if we move over here to what our percentage of the mean is, here's our values, here's the mean. We want to know what percentage is this value of this mean in each case. What we can do first is, let's move down over here. We want this guy equals this over this. Fantastic. So we know that 1 is 8% of 13. That makes sense to me. But if I drag this equation down, I have gotten an error message here, divided by 0. And why is that? Because if I look at my equation by clicking on that cell and going up here, it shows me what I'm dividing. Well, I've done this, and because those are relative references, what has happened is my denominator has moved down from 13 to the next lower. Our numerator went down from here to here, so it only makes sense that our denominator would do the same thing. Well, how do we change that? Well, we can go back to our equation right here, and we've typed in our E3, and now we want to type in this. If I want to make that absolute, actually I should go to my previous one because we're going to want to drag down. Let's go to right here. And when I click on my E11, which is my 13, which is the mean of all these, if I just type F4 in there, it's going to put those dollar signs before the E and before the 11. That means lock the column, E, lock the row, 11. Right there, press enter or control enter, and the 8% is still there. You can see that that still references those same two cells. But the difference now is if I drag that down, now the percentage is correct. Ah, look at that. It still references the mean there being 13. We move down, same thing. Keeps that 13 the same all the way through. Okay, so here's an example down here where we're going to use the next level of relativity, where we want to be either relative only to the column or only to the row. So for each of these right here, we want them to be basically 2 times 0.2 for this value right here. So this is going to equal this times this. Whoops. Let's see if we can going to be C13. There we go. Okay, great. But if I drag this here, right here, that gives us the 4, which is great. But you can see we've moved from that 0.4 down, or 0.2 down to that 0.4. That's not what we want. We want this to stay up there at that one. So how do we get the equation correct in the first cell so that we can drag it? Well, let's go back. If you type this one in, and we're going to type equals, and we click on our first guy right here, our B14, we want that to be locked for the column, but not the row. So the $ needs to be in front of the B. So on that, we're pressing our F4 once again. You can see now it's relative to, or it's absolute for both. We don't want that. This is relative to or absolute for the row. And then if we press it a third time, we get the B, the $ in front of the B. Now we are locked right there. Okay, good. Now the second part is multiply it by this column here. Now this one, we want to be absolute for the row because we're going to be dragging it to the right, but we don't want the column to move as we go down a diagonal. So we want this to be locked for row. So we're going to type F4 again with that C13. Once again, that's going to be just that cell. We want it to move to the right in the row. So we're going to go C $13. Now if we do that and we drag down and over, you can see that if we look at which this references, it is referencing the correct cells for both the dilution standard and the original volume right there. So this is just looking at a nice little table using some relative and absolute references right there. Okay, there's another way to do this though. We can change this a little bit if we have a little bit more complicated equation. So we're going to make one more. This one is one that I had to make beforehand. Basically what we're saying is if we have a starting population of cells and a known growth rate after X amount of generations, what will be the size of our population? So this is our starting population out up here. This is our ending population. The equation we have here is it's going to be B1 times B2 raised to the power of B3. So it's 2 times 2.3 to the 10th power, okay? But now we have all these different starting populations, 2 all the way up to 3 by a 10th, and then we have this many generations. We want to see how this changes over those different generations. Well, there's just a different way to do this. Let's select the table. So we're going to go all the way from B4, right there, all the way to H15. So that's what we want to fill in. And you can see the most important thing here is that we have this first cell selected. Great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the data tab right here. Data. And under the data tab, there should be a what if analysis. If we go to what if analysis and select data table, we now have some options. Where's the input? Where is the column? So what's the row? What's the column? And the row is going to be our B3. How many generations? 5, 10, 15. That's our row. Okay? What's our column input? Our column input is going to be the growth rate. 2, 2.1, 2.3, and so on. Okay? If we do that and click OK, you can see that this gets populated with all of those different options automatically. This is a little bit different. You can see that the equation here with table is a little bit different, but if you need a quick way to populate a table and you don't want to do the version that we showed before with the absolute and relative references, this is one other way to create a table. All right. And for right now, I want to leave it there for the first part of this lecture. Take a break, go through some of these examples. I want you to get comfortable with entering equations, moving around within your Excel, and that's going to help you to be more beneficial as we move forward. move this back real quick. So before I end this lecture, I just want to talk about the assignment that we're going to give at the end. I'll post the second part to this lecture tomorrow morning on Friday. And after that, that's going to give you a couple more options. What I want you to do for assignment number 4 here is create an Excel video. And I'm going to post an SOP of how to do that. I've reached out to Christy Boggs right now. She's going to help us with that. So you're going to do a screen recording, and you won't have to have a video of yourself, but it will be your voice. Your screen video will just be your Excel. I want you to think of an example from some research that you may be involved with, or something that could be relevant to even maybe your budgeting for your home, something like that. And I want you to narrate an equation building using 5 of the skills that we've talked about here. And the great thing is you have the reference of the book. So use 5 skills that you have within these videos. So video 1 posted right now. Video 2 will be posted tomorrow morning. And then use 1 additional equation or skill that is not necessarily listed in these 2 assignments. What I want you to do to get that, you can go to other places in the book if you'd like. You can also Google different sorts of equations. Googling is really good for help with Excel if you need it, and add that in. As you're adding that in to the equation and to your video, I want you to be explicit about telling me this is an equation that I did not get from reading or watching your 2 videos. Okay, so that's going to be important. I will go over this, and this rubric will be posted a little bit earlier tomorrow morning, and we can move on from there. So for right now, that's part 1 of lecture number 4, which is your intro to Excel equations. Thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.